Today, I'm showing you how to take one basic mead recipe and turn it into 3 or more incredible meads. So let's get started. In front of me, I have 3 bottles of mead. These bottles originated from one mead from the start and then turned into 3 different things. So in this video, I'm showing you the basic concept of just making mead, and when you're trying to figure out what to do with it, splitting it out into different batches and then deciding to do different things. What's fun about this video is I've kind of waited for a long time because I took this basic mead recipe, split it out, sent it to a competition to see how it did, and I got a couple of awards for each one. Each one of these meads received an award, and one of them received a best of show, and so we'll talk about that. So a lot of people do this with mead making because it's a great way to get other flavors of mead. Making a traditional mead and leaving it as that is very fun, but it's also fun to make fruited meads or spiced meads or any other combo of those things. So let's walk through a basic recipe card that you're gonna start with for this. This is gonna be a 3-gallon batch that we're making today. So that's why the recipe card is like that. We're gonna start with roughly about 9 pounds of honey. Specifically, I'm using coffee blossom honey, but you can choose whatever you got. Whatever you choose, make it a fun, high quality honey. After you have your honey, you're gonna get some water, of course. For this brew, I actually used the Craft-A US-05, which is a notable ale yeast for beer. And that was something I thought would produce a quality product, and it did. So we pitched in our yeast with our honey and our water. We also added some tannin, wine tannin to be specific. With this, that will help give it some more body and base for the whole batch. And of course, yeast nutrient. I prefer Fermento, but you might like Fermade K, diammonium phosphate, or some alternative. Regardless of what you choose, make sure you add the correct amount for this. You can follow my recipe card if you want to use that. With this being a higher ABV mead, we're gonna need to use our yeast nutrient over the course of a couple days, so we'll talk about that. But we've mixed together honey, water, yeast, wine tannin. We take a starting gravity reading for this brew. Our starting gravity is gonna sit roughly about 1.090. It could fluctuate, you could be between 1.090 and maybe 1.100 depending on your honey. We've taken that gravity reading with a hydrometer, which is a very helpful tool for you. Now we just let it ferment. About 24, 48 hours in, you can start to add your yeast nutrient. You can do this slowly and carefully. It will bubble up, so I added a little bit of my yeast nutrient at 24 hours and then a little bit at 48 hours. This is called staggering your food or your nutrition for your yeast, and it just helps them ferment a little cleaner and more healthily. So we've gone down the path, we've mixed together everything, and we're going to now let it ferment, finish fermenting, which assumedly, yours is gonna finish somewhere in the realm of 1.000. This actually finished at 1.000, even with the Craft-A US-05, which notably goes up to 12% as its cap. It reached beyond that. So this thing is about 12.5% ABV. So we have this finished mead. This is where we get to split it out and take our little fork point. Whatever flavors you have in mind. You could be thinking like fruit, you could be thinking spices, you could be thinking, I don't know, other honeys, something like that. This is where you get to do the cool thing of mixing it out. So I did this 3 ways. I made a fruited mead, I made a blackberry version because I really wanted to try that. We also did 2 spiced versions, specifically a coffee mead and a actual spiced one with cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, and vanilla. So the first thing you'll do is you'll take your finished mead, well, I say finished, your out of primary mead, and you'll move it into a new container, specifically 3 containers, since that's what we're doing here. Part of my step was I wanted to go ahead and stabilize this brew so that I could add sugars to it without the fear of it re-fermenting. So I used potassium sorbate, metabisulfite. You can use just those things, or you could pasteurize. Regardless, I recommend if you want to add extra sugars and keep those, to do one of those 2 things. So we stabilized it in each container. So now they're ready for the next steps. The coffee mead was the first one I tackled. I added 1 ounce of coffee beans that I found enjoyable. I made a couple cups of coffee with it to see if I liked them. And 1 ounce of coffee beans, whole bean into the whole container. and I let that set. Now you may be tempted to think that I let it set for a really long time. I did not. I let the coffee beans sit in there for about 4 days, and I knew to pull them off of the brew or out of the brew because I taste tested it regularly. When I got to the coffee point that I liked, I went ahead and pulled them out or racked it off of those. At that point, we also back sweetened this brew, so we added a pound of honey to back sweeten, raising this to the final gravity of about 1.030. At this point, in the same little timeline that I had pulled the coffee beans out, I went ahead and added my spices to the spiced version. So we had racked it into a new container, stabilized it, and we added specifically, noting this is a 1 gallon brew, because we split it out, 1/4 teaspoon of ginger, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/8 teaspoon of clove, and 1 cinnamon stick, and a little bit of vanilla extract to taste. We also added 12 ounces of honey to back sweeten that. We let those spices set for about 4 or 5 days. The cinnamon stick did a lot of work in that time, and the others were powdered. It's because they were powdered, they were already mixed in. There was no like adding flavor by any means. Now this one was kind of hard to rack because the powdered spices were pretty fine. So I tried to get creative and use like some mesh or something to get the little powdered versions out, and it was pretty tough. So it's not very clear because that powder really did some work. For the blackberry version, I went ahead and added 3 pounds of blackberries into the container with it. Now I had used some pectic enzyme on them to help break them down. I pitched my mead on top of those, and I let that set for about 2 weeks. Through the process, I punched the cap, which is where you push the fruit down to keep it submerged, keep any bad bacteria from getting on there. So I did that about every day, really gently to not add oxygen. And once that was done, 2 weeks had gone by, on my blackberries, I went ahead and moved it into a new container, and we also back sweetened this one. We back sweetened pretty lightly, I think it was about 8 ounces of honey, so this one sat a little bit lighter. At this point, they had all been through their extra flavor process. We had our coffee mead done, we had our spiced mead done, we had our blackberry mead done. Here's a timeline roughly of what this looked like. It will change based off what you use. For example, the coffee mead was done faster than the berry mead or the fruit mead because naturally the fruit sat in longer. However, they're all the same age. We went ahead and bottled them, and I sent them off to some competitions. Specifically, I sent it off to the Sowers Cup, which is a competition in Nebraska. Oh, I should know this. Correction on the screen. We sent it off to this competition, and for the video, I wanted to do something fun. I named them Thing 1, Thing 2, and Thing 3. Now, to be honest, I don't remember. Actually, I can tell you. So Thing 1 was the coffee mead, Thing 2 was the blackberry mead version, and Thing number 3 was the spiced mead, which used the cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, vanilla, I think that's everything. Maybe a little bit of ginger, I think I missed that. So all those spices there. I entered them with no expectations of anything happening. It was just kind of fun, and I was like, it'd be cool to see how they do, naming them like Dr. Seuss style. Funny enough, I got a 3rd place medal for the coffee mead right here. I got a 2nd place medal for the fruit mead, which is right here, blackberry. And I got a 1st place medal for the spiced mead. And on top of that, the spiced mead was the best of show, this really cool trophy I'll get a close-up of, for that competition. So they all medaled, and they all did pretty well. I can give scores as well for what they did, but they did super well, which is shocking, and I was not expecting it. Now, I know you're like, you told me about all the medals, you told me how to make it. Let's taste them real fast, and then we'll talk a little bit more about splitting things out. But I wanted to note, that's kind of fun. It's cool to enter things into competitions, especially if it does well. That's kind of cool. Let's taste them. All right, so here they are. The blackberry mead, of course, has this kind of purpley tint. You can see to it. The spiced mead, surprisingly, is clear. Even, I tried really hard to get all of the stuff out, so it's pretty clear. And the one that's not clear, of all of them, but also not a dark color, is the coffee mead. So I'm gonna start here with my third place entry. It's very coffee forward on the nose, of course. That's the first thing you get hit with. One of the comments on the actually mead was, he said something like, yeah, the coffee is super apparent and I was worried that it was gonna be too strong, and then he tasted it and it was not too strong. It is a punch in the face of coffee bean though. There we go. Exactly what he said. In your face, punching aroma, and then you get this honey presence, and the coffee actually kind of rises out. It kind of pops up later. I think it's fantastic. I've done a couple iterations of coffee, and whole bean I think is the way to go. Super interesting. For a while I was like, I don't think I'd like a coffee mead, but it's pretty good. So simply enough, if you want to make a coffee mead, make it traditional. Now use a fun honey, of course, and do nice honey. Throw in whole beans and about 1 ounce per gallon for about 3 to 4 days, and I think you make yourself a pretty good mead. You do need to back sweeten it slightly. All right, let's go to the second place, which was the blackberry mead right here. Definitely a more rich, obviously fruity profile. It's got a wine-esque kind of vibe. A little less sweet, more, like I said, wine. Like it's got some more juicy profile. It's not very tanniny like a red wine. It's got a little like juicy aspect. But the blackberry is apparent and it's really nicely done. It's really clean. This brew does not present any fusels, any off flavors, and that's mostly because of the ferment dough, the schedule I used, taking care of my yeast. Also very good. I'll put up a composite score of what this thing got, but that was my second place in the fruit category. Last but not least, the best to show. Spiced mead. It smells like Christmas because of all of those flavors. It's so candle-like and aromatic. This thing I made before I got the best to show and all that thing. I went ahead and started 5 gallons of this exact brew because I was like, I know I like this one. It smells like a candle and Christmas. It's, And it drinks like it too. I mean, it's got this very perfumey. You get all of those nice characteristics from the spices. The nutmeg is definitely there, and you get a lot of that clove. The vanilla adds some softness. The cinnamon is just a little bit of that tingle back there, and the ginger, of course, adds some brightness. And interestingly, this thing does have, I don't want to say like a Coca-Cola or Pepsi kind of vibe, but it has like a little bit of this syrupy nature. They're reminiscent of it, at least to me. But super well balanced, obviously, very good. I think that thing tastes awesome. All 3 taste very good. And the fun thing about this video, I want to encourage you to try this, is take a big batch of mead, split it out, and just have some fun. I did these on a whim. I just kind of threw things in. Said, what would happen if I used blackberry or used coffee or used spices? You could do the same thing with any combo. It's very simple, a great way to make mead. You don't necessarily have to throw things all in the primary fermentation. You can do things in the secondary or post-stabilizing or pasteurizing. Regardless, it's an open sandbox for you to try to make some stuff. So my encouragement to you is try it, make a big batch of mead, split it out, do some fun stuff, and let me know what you do in the comments. I've really enjoyed getting to do this. And obviously the medals and the best of show is just the cherry on top. I was gonna post this video regardless, but it's just a little more fun. So thank you for watching. Leave a comment, hit subscribe, do all those things, and I'd be curious to see what you guys wanna see next on the channel. So with that, cheers.